Hi, and welcome to the Savage Chamber of Commerce Meet the Candidate Forum with Jess Hanson. My name is Heather Prosky, and I am the president of the Savage Chamber of Commerce. And I'd like to introduce Jess Hanson, running for Minnesota House District 56A, which includes Savage, and she's running for the Minnesota House of Representatives. Jess, how are you today? Welcome.
Hel- Hello, thank you for having me. I am well. I just want to say a quick thank you to you and the City of Savage staff and chamber and everybody who has put this on. This is a great opportunity to get to talk directly to voters in a time of social distancing, and thank you so very much for hosting me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Yes, again, in the social distancing mode that we are in, we are doing anything possible to get the word spread about your message and what you're doing here in Savage and parts of Burnsville too. I will say that you do cover the northwest portion of Burnsville, and it's a great community for us to be able to have you involved in there and just spreading your message of what you're bringing to the table moving forward. So on that note, Jess, why don't you give us a brief introduction of yourself, include some history of your past political experiences and accomplishments, either elected or volunteer. Volunteerism is so important right now. Like what are you doing to spread your name and get your name out there?
Sure. So, just a little bit about, I guess, my background. I am from the south suburbs. I have lived here my entire life. I grew up in a trailer park in Lakeville. My parents struggled to make ends meet there, so I grew up watching really hardworking families do everything they could to keep the lights on and keep food on the table and keep their kids involved in sports and all of that. And then as I got into being a teenager, I became a mom when I was just 17 years old. And that was right in 2004, just a few years before the economy crashed. And so that obviously presented a lot of new challenges. I turned 18 with a 6-week-old baby and no health insurance. And so
Wow.
had firsthand experience knowing kind of what that lifestyle was like. We made it with the help of some great social safety net programs, and we're able to get on our own 2 feet. And then the economy crashed, and working two full-time jobs, I was still struggling to make ends meet. I got a job when I was 19 with an insurance company. I've been there ever since. And I also was waiting tables at the time. So it was a hard struggle to try to keep my kids insured and keep a roof over our heads. And then when I was 25 with two young kids, I decided to go back to college. I wanted to make a difference in my community because I was watching so many people struggle with things. Now I'm a first generation college graduate. I have my undergraduate degree in social work from St. Catherine University, and I'm finishing up my master's degree in advocacy and political leadership from Metropolitan State University. And now I'm ready to be a public servant. Believe that the people of Savage and Northwest Burnsville deserve a representative that cares about them. I believe that there are real people here with real problems that need real solutions, and that we deserve a representative who's going to amplify our voice all the way to St. Paul.
That's great, Jess. Thank you. Thank you for that message. And yeah, the struggle is real for sure. And you are proof positive that right now we can get through it all, and you've done it. So that's wonderful. Well, I'm just going to have a really, couple quick questions here for you to answer. Let's just keep this really conversational and just, talk about, things that are happening now and kind of the future. I mean, we're all optimistic for the future, and just kind of want to hear where you're coming from. So, is there anything else, first and foremost, that you want to add to your background and history and all of that before I start
Uh,
questioning?
the only thing I say over and over, and you'll hear me say on the campaign trail, is I believe that politics is how we care about each other. And again, I'm ready to amplify the voices of this community, all the way from the kitchen table where we talk about our problems to the committee table in St. Paul where those problems get solved. So I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to serve.
That's great. That's great. Thanks, Jess. Well, just kind of leading off of what you had just said, tell me what you're hearing when you're out and about in the community. What are the messages that you're hearing from Savage residents, from Burnsville residents? What are their concerns? What are their wants and needs? I'm totally going off cuff here, but like I said, let's keep this conversational and
Sure,
just
sure.
kind of talk about it. But your words just resonated with me. What are you hearing? What are the main hardships? Bright future opportunities that you're hearing and seeing and want to
Yeah.
parlay?
So when I started this campaign, I came into this with the value that community centered leadership is what's most important. And so my campaign has been centered around the issues that I've heard from residents of this district that are most important to them, and that's what I'm running on. You'll meet some politicians who will run on their own belief systems only. For me, that wasn't what our community really wanted. They wanted someone who's going to fight for what was important to them, and that's what I promised to do. So the main issues that I've heard people talking about the most are affordable health care, equitable education, and the desire for a responsible and proactive government. And so when we talk about affordable health care, I come from the health insurance world. I've seen from the inside what measures we can take as a legislature that will help to bring the cost of health care down, whether that's by making sure we're holding pharmaceutical companies accountable for the price gouging of life-saving medications like EpiPens, asthma inhalers, insulin, blood thinners, and so much more, to the idea that we can create a world where health insurance is no longer tied to employment. I know that I have several friends who own small businesses who struggle to provide insurance to their employees because it's just so expensive. And so making sure we can work towards that place is where I've heard residents want to go. So that's expanding a Minnesota Care buy-in option. And so making that more accessible to more people. I think the equitable education piece of it, a lot of it surrounds around funding and making sure that there are support systems in place for both students and staff, and making sure that kids feel safest at school. I think that's a really important conversation that I hear youth and teachers and parents talking a lot about. And so when we talk about funding, that's imagining a world where we have an innovative funding model that fully funds education the way that we value it here in Savage and Burnsville. We know that residents here vote over and over again for the referendums to
Mhm.
fund our schools because we support public education and we prioritize and care about it. And I think that there's a point in time where we have to continue to work with the state and hold them accountable for keeping their per pupil capita up with inflation. And that hasn't happened. And so we need to look at the innovative ways that we can fund that. And of course, keeping kids safe in school means that we're talking about common sense gun regulations. It means that we're talking about having mental health practitioners available to students in every school. That means supporting first year teachers who really want to do this work, but need to have that hands-on experience every day in their beginning years. And so education is going to continue to be a big pillar of this. And then lastly, I think responsible and proactive government. We want a government that's prepared to protect us. We want a government that listens more than it talks. And we want a government that is going to proactively address a problem before it's too late, before something happens that we can't undo, or before a family is left with an outcome that we all grieve. And so I think those are the big issues that I've been hearing the most about here in the district.
Are you hearing anything about the COVID? I mean, COVID's
Oh,
been
of
on
course.
everybody's mind and all of that. And I know, like, when you and I started talking, you were most comfortable in this situation where
Yes.
we are meeting virtual and all of that. What are you hearing as far as the COVID-19 pandemic that has affected Savage and Burnsville pretty hard, and the
Yep.
residents, the same way too? I mean, right now numbers are rising, but we're hopeful that with a vaccine that they'll drop and we'll,
Yep.
get back to some normalcy in our state again.
Sure. I think the first thing I'll say is that it has become very, very clear that the role of politicians and legislators in this public health crisis has been had a light shined upon it. And I think it's really important that we have politicians and legislators that take this seriously, that follow the science, and make sure that we're addressing the issues that are affecting families. So we know that there's been businesses throughout the district and the state who have been put out of business because of this, and some others are doing really well. I don't want to
Right,
say
right,
that everybody's doing bad, because we
right.
know that there are some businesses doing really well. But when we, even with the PPE loans and the CARES Act money, that had to go through banks and the origination fees that came out of that. And where was all that money actually going? And so I think those are some important pieces to talk about just from an economic perspective. And next year in the first session, we have to prioritize talking about offering low and no interest business loans to the businesses that aren't too far in debt. We also have to talk about how we help those businesses who did didn't make it and are now underneath massive debt with a business that they no longer have because of an issue they had no control over. So we have to make sure we're listening to those. My great grandfather owned a small business in the district most of my life over on Chowan Avenue. So I grew up in that environment of watching how a small business put food on the table and left that money down for future generations as well. So the importance of supporting our small businesses here is really important. I think the best way to get the economy back is to get COVID under control as fast as possible. So again, expanding contact tracing and things like that are going to be very important steps. I would like to see a world where outside of every big box store there is a Department of Health testing tent that everybody can drive up and get tested, as they need. Again and again, I hear folks in the district say that even getting tested has posed some barriers to people. So that's going to be a very important piece. And then we have obviously children who aren't in school and are struggling with lack of social interaction, sports that are some are going, some are not. And then even in the school classroom, they're only there part time and then are on virtual. So we have 5 and 6 year olds who've had to learn how to use the mute button and turn their cameras on, and we're really pushing them to engage in this digital world in a different way. But the lack of access to border to border broadband has posed an issue to that. So with kids that don't have access to that education, or even people who need to access broadband for mental health services or other medical services, all of that has continued to make itself very evident and clear here. And I don't want to leave this conversation without also acknowledging the disproportionate impacts that COVID has had on our Black and Brown communities. And so making sure that we're having very clear conversations about what access to testing and care for COVID looks like, as well as supporting families that need to have resources in place, because a lot of people are already out in the workplace, or their kids are now back in school, and so that transmission rate is unfortunately probably going to continue to fluctuate over the next couple of months as we approach winter here.
Yeah, winter, that big W word. We got that looking down the pipeline here too. Well, thank you. Thank you for those answers. And I know in your introduction you said you are a newer politician into the
Mhm.
game here. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you've done in the past to influence government, the way government operates? Can you just give me a little bit of a timeline of how you've made this happen and who you've
Yeah.
worked with and where you've gone from there?
Sure. So I really started really paying attention to what was happening in my, community as a teenager. When I was aware of how, as a kid in a trailer park, was treated maybe a little bit differently than kids who weren't. I began to recognize the systems that affect our lives from a young age. And obviously, becoming a young mother, those systems became even more clear to me as I realized, how hard it really was to raise a family or get a good paying job and things like that. And I think it's important that we continue to have the conversations with people who aren't involved in politics to tell them that you belong in politics, because politics affects every single part of our lives. And I just saw that as I was transitioning through my stages of life. When I went to school for social work, I had a professor who said, "Have you ever thought about getting involved in politics? You're really passionate about a lot of these issues." And that really spurred some growth for me to examine where I could get involved at the political level in my community. And so I started working on food security issues, looking at what kinds of food deserts we have around the state, doing some advocating there. And really, it was like citizen advocacy. Um, and then as I got further along, I found myself working on more issues like I did a volunteer event for a warrant forgiveness day in Hennepin County, and that just shed the light on so many of the gaps in our justice system. And then I was working on police accountability issues after somebody I cared about pretty deeply was impacted by a mental health crisis and a police situation that resulted with his death. And so that was really, a personal experience that pushed me into this work. And then as I was graduating from my undergraduate program, I got involved with cannabis legalization. And that was probably the biggest piece that pushed me directly into the halls of the Minnesota House and right in front of legislators. And so I was the executive director of the Minnesota Campaign for Full Legalization. When we started doing that, our goals were to change the way that we talked about cannabis use in Minnesota and what the future of this industry looked like, because it is inevitable, it is coming, and it's important that we have some plans around it and some goals around what we want that to look like. So we have the best model in the country. And so I worked alongside my team, working with Majority Leader Ryan Winkler and Speaker Hortman and a number of other legislators who helped us to get to where we are today. We have a bill that is ready to be introduced that Majority Leader Winkler has been carrying and has been a great advocate on. And so I'm really proud of that work and that where that's kind of brought us. And then aside from that, I've worked a lot within the party to make sure that we can do this work inclusively, that everybody finds that they have a place in this work, whether they have a college degree or they have experience doing politics or not. Because again, I believe that politics is how we care about each other. And I don't think that you need a college degree or anything to be passionate about the issues that are important to your community. And so continuing to create space for new leadership to be born and for new voices to be heard in the political process than what we've seen in the past. So working with organizations like Vote Run Lead and participating in their trainings, just continuing to spread the message as a real grassroots organizer here out in the district. And now, like I said, I worked on Hunter's campaign. I was a door knocker. I was a photographer. I was a sign dropper. I did door knock trainings, and so I saw how his campaign worked. And so when I learned he wasn't running again, and he sat down with me, I knew we'd have to work really hard to keep this district, and that I'd seen firsthand a lot of the work that had been done, and that I knew I could carry the values that this community has this in many of the same ways that he has.
That's amazing. I mean, great work on your side. That's you're definitely busy, and it's
Yes.
very widespread of what you're doing. So thank you for doing that. Jess, if you could write and sign 3 bills into law today, what would they be, and why are you choosing these 3 for? What do you think is best for this district and statewide as well?
Yeah, I think the top three would be. Oh, this is a hard question because I have so many. I could just go on and on about how many I want to do, but I think the top three are going to be to rein in the cost of medications. These are life-saving medications that people rely on to live, and we can't underscore that enough. This isn't, a medication that's for a temporary condition. Not that those aren't just as important, but folks that rely on these medications to live deserve a legislature that is going to fight to make sure that they can afford these medications. So I think that's going to be a huge piece of this. And some of that is reining in the pharmacy benefit managers and looking at incentives that pharmaceutical companies offer and more of that. So it gets a little weedy when you get into the weeds of it, but that is an extremely important issue to me. I think if I had a magic wand and I could expand the Minnesota Care buy-in option like immediately, that would be the next thing I would do because we have too many Minnesotans who are uninsured, and our health is our highest priority. And I think the third piece of it would be an economic piece, which would be, like I mentioned, to expand the hemp and cannabis industry. We have an opportunity to be a leader in the hemisphere and to continue to hold our reputation of one of the best agricultural states in the country by expanding this. We have to save our soil. If we don't save our soil, we can't save the planet. And so that is a huge piece of this. And so expanding to new cash crops and expanding to new industries both helps us save our planet and save our soil and helps create new revenue. And I think that there is a lot of money to be made there. And again, these industries are inevitable. They're going to come to Minnesota one way or another. And I think it's up to us to really drive that change so that we can make it an increase for tourism, an increase for state revenue, and an increase for job opportunities around the state.
Thank you for that. Um, how should the state of Minnesota balance the concerns currently happening right now between public health and the economy? And what role should the legislator have in this process? This is such a hot topic right now because, we feeling it coming from the Savage Chamber side, I am business driven. We are, here for the Savage businesses. And like you said earlier, some are doing extremely well and some have been hurt extremely and are suffering right now.
Yeah.
So how are we going to balance these public health concerns and the economy to get to a playing field that is, equal for everybody?
Yeah. I think, like I mentioned before, the best way to get the economy back and to help the businesses that are suffering is to get COVID under control. So I strongly support mask mandates. The more people that wear them, the faster we can get it under control, and also support increased contact tracing and testing overall. So that way we know kind of where this stuff is coming from, where the hot spots are, and we can address those proactively. Again, responsible government is proactive. So that's a big piece of it. I think alternatively, I would mention that there's unemployment benefits that have run out for a lot of businesses. There are also, again, like I mentioned, the PPE loans from the Federal CARES Act and like the origination fees that went out to banks, like that. I think there's more money that could have come into businesses. And I think it's important that we acknowledge there are a lot of businesses that feel like there can be as many people as possible inside of a big box store, but yet these smaller businesses are restricted to how many people can be inside of their building because of square footage and different, rules that are embedded within the mandates. And so I think continuing to have the conversation about what does it look like to safely operate the businesses in light of COVID is going to require everybody to be at the table. So small business owners that are out there, or even medium to large size business owners, the solutions that they're putting in place that they have, or the proposals they even have, all of that's got to come together at the table. It can't be a whole discussion without someone feeling left out if we're not making sure everyone's at the table. So I have advisory councils built into my campaign, and I hope that I can encourage folks to join those, because those will be people I continue to reference back to and talk to, including the chamber here in Savage and the chamber in Burnsville, as we're having these conversations in the legislature, to be sure that your voices are included. I believe that the solutions to the problems people face are among the minds of people experiencing those problems. We just have to listen and work together to again get that message to travel from the kitchen table or the bar where it's discussed, and get that to the legislature. And I want to be that vehicle that can help move that conversation there. But those are some of the things that I've heard from some of the business owners that I've talked to, at least.
Yeah, just having listening is like just a key thing, and you just touched on that. How would somebody get in touch with you to voice their concerns, voice what they're hearing in Savage and in the northwestern part of Burnsville? How are they going to get in touch with you to be able to voice those so that you can take their message with you on the campaign trail, forward through November, and really get addressed what we are feeling as a pressure point, an issue here in Savage, wanting to get rectification of all of this?
Sure. So I have tried to make myself as extremely accessible as possible. So I give everybody, first of all, my personal cell phone number, which I'll give it to you now for anybody watching. It's 651 271 9344. I've had this phone number since I was like 14 years old. My kids and my grandma and my mom call me on it, and it is my communities to call me on as well, because I want to be as accessible as I can to people. You can call me, you can text me, video call me, whatever's most convenient for you. Assuming that I'm not doing something that I can't talk while I'm doing, I will always answer, whether it's 9 in the morning or if it's midnight. I want to make sure I'm available to people in that way. They can also email us, which is my contact us at jesshanson4house.com, all spelled out, Hanson's with an O-N. And the alternative is on my website, there is a link to our advisory councils under our volunteer opportunities. And so folks can go there to sign up to join an advisory council. We're compiling the list of folks that are interested to be on those councils. And then as the issues come up that pertain to that particular issue, I will make outreach to them. We'll have regular meetings. I'm hoping that, through hopefully my getting elected and getting sworn in, we can really focus a lot of time on getting those off the ground and make sure that as many people as possible are engaged and involved in them, so that in that time between, we can plan, we can collaborate, we can get ahead of things, so that we're not trying to have the conversations in the heat of session. As an advocate, a policy advocate, I found that when you try to discuss issues in the heat of session, everyone's kind of flustered and they don't always have a lot of time to commit to things. And so I want to make sure that I'm creating that space for folks to engage with me ahead of time. And hopefully, eventually, we would even be able to raise enough money to provide these advisory councils a stipend, so that they can continue to do community outreach, so that they can continue to work with the communities in different ways. So whether it's working with me directly, just getting your voice heard and just telling me so I can carry it, or it's getting involved and really mobilizing those efforts to create the change that we want to see in the world.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that information because yeah, sometimes just hearing it is different than seeing it, and you have passion behind that, so it's great to get involved.
Yeah.
Jess, so imagine 10 years from now, pre-COVID world, we are back and doing good. The business is booming, and we're getting back to the lifestyle that we're used to. What do you see Savage looking like 10 years from now? What is your vision both of it and for it? What do you
Yeah.
hope for? Where do you want it to be 10 years from now?
So that's a great question. I love this question because I'm a visionary. So I tend to look at things in the future and then we work on how to get there. And I see us having a great transit line that runs all the way from the cities down here so that commuting to the cities and commuting around the south suburbs is more realistic and more accessible for more people. I envision having the dump dug and moved and having a new marina off of 13. I envision also having a stellar small business community where we have a very diverse group of small business owners where folks are incentivized to start businesses and create jobs right here in our community through Scott County and Dakota County with a partnership that says this is the commerce center of the south suburbs. Come join it. And I think that's going to be a really important piece of this. We already have a booming, small business community here in Burnsville and Savage, and I want to just watch that grow and continue to foster that growth as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, that sounds I just perfect. I love that. I love that. Well, Jess, I don't have any more specific written out questions. Just to keep the conversation going, is there anything else that we didn't touch on or anything else you want to add? Do you want to do a 2-minute wrap up here? Just, let's just, however you're feeling right now, let's talk about it.
Sure. I think we're 28 days out from the election right now, and I'm a regular person doing an extraordinary thing. I wasn't raised to think I was going to grow up to be a politician, when people call me that too, it still kind of feels a little different because I'm a community activist, I'm a community advocate with a ton of policy experience. And so the most important thing that I just leave a lot of the forums or community discussions to talk about is if you're watching this, it's because you're already involved and you care about these issues. And there's a place for you in this work to continue to create that change. I'm going to be in Minnesota the rest of my life. I am not going anywhere, and I'm committed to making this the best state in every regard: healthcare, education, jobs, everything, industry. We have what it takes to make these decisions here and to lead the nation like the North Star state that we are. And as a lifelong resident of the south suburbs, I'm just so proud to be a south of the river representative and make sure that we can talk about the issues that are important to us. We're fighting for our lakes and rivers, we're fighting for clean air, we're fighting for new transportation options, we're fighting to fully fund our education. We're fighting to make sure everybody feels safe in their communities. These are issues that are affecting everybody's lives. And I was asked, I'm running for office because somebody asked me to. And enough people came to me and said, Jess, we want you to do this. We want you to represent us. And I know that there are other leaders out there who are going to help us rein in and bring that change that we want to see. And so I just encourage everybody, you could be anywhere today, but you chose to be here. You chose to be watching this particular event, and to follow that energy, follow those feelings, and let's create the change that we want to see in Minnesota. And, we've got however many years left the good Lord will give us to be here, and let's use them as best as we can.
And get out and vote.
And get out and
Yeah,
vote,
whether
please.
it's
And
in
there's,
person here at Savage City Hall,
yes,
they have somebody here every day, or get your mail-in ballot,
yep,
or show up on November 3rd. I mean, we
yep,
will definitely have polling options available day of too. So
yes.
I'm not sure, but I think the date to register early for voter registration is coming up, and
One
then
week away.
1 week away. Yep, and then
Yes.
you can still register to vote in person day
Yes.
of. So
Thank
just
you,
getting
state of
all of those
Minnesota, for
messages
that.
out.
Yes,
Yep.
yes,
Yep.
yes.
So those are important. Well, Jess, thank you very much for your time. I wish you
Mhm.
all the success in the world moving forward in your campaigning. And on November 3rd, we'll be anxiously waiting for some decisions and hear from that. But thank you. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate
Yes.
you greatly.
Thank you for hosting this. Thank you for hosting it via Zoom. I appreciate everybody. And like I said, this is a great opportunity, and I can't wait to serve this community in the ways that you all deserve. So thank you again.
Thank you, Jess. Have a good night.
You too. Take care. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye now.